front row.
Oh, okay. Hello. I'm Mike Daming. Nice to meet you.
We got Scott from Planning Design Studios.
Okay.
Is someone here from the sign? Is that okay? You're Sue? Christine, I'm sorry. Okay, because I don't know if I've actually met face to face with people from here. So nice to meet you. Okay, so then yeah, we have someone here.
Oh, hello. Ready when you are, Mr. Clayton. Okay. I'd like to welcome everybody to the March 13th meeting of the City of Brentwood Planning and Zoning Commission. If you'll please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Flag, United States of America, republic for which it stands.
Roll call, please.
Sherry Bilderback, Mike Daming,
Here.
Mark Favazza,
Here.
Rebecca Jacobs, here. Jeff Moore, here. Paul Moran,
Here.
Art Nelson,
Here.
John Neuenberger, John Ritter,
Here.
Lisa Schuring, here. Tom Shipley.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you for coming, everybody, in the rain. Appreciate it. First item under the agenda tonight are approval of two sets of minutes, one from January 9 and the other from February 13. Has everyone had an opportunity to look at those minutes, and are there any changes to said minutes? Seeing none, they'll be approved by acclamation. We have 3 items under old business, all of which we've taken up under various meetings, under 2 different meetings. The first is a site plan review for a new 3-story office building at 200 Industrial Court. It's my understanding that the applicant has requested that be tabled, Ms. Kirkemeyer?
Correct. We received that request in writing Monday morning, and they would like to just table it to the April meeting. So,
Any objection to that tabling as requested by the applicant? Seeing none, it'll be tabled by acclamation. Next item under old business is an amendment to the conditional use permit for Brentwood Square to permit a second restaurant for property at 1507 South Brentwood Boulevard. Is the applicant here? Will you please step forward, sir, and introduce yourself? As the commission will know, we took this matter up at the last open meeting as well as the subcommittee meeting of February 27th. And you'll note, for those of you that weren't at the subcommittee meeting, we have the minutes before you this evening. Sir, remind me your name.
Evan Barnett.
Okay, Mr. Barnett, are there any changes to the application since our last subcommittee meeting?
No changes, some notes to the document Lisa sent out, added a condition requiring ownership to basically improve or identify the crosswalks from basically from CIBC building across to Brentwood, and then as well as from Brentwood Square, I guess, to the east on the sidewalk to Eager Road. All the ramps, everything's in place. The striping, actually, you can see was there. The ownership is certainly willing to work with the city and potentially St. Louis County, whoever has jurisdiction under those particular portions of the roadways. You know, one of the things with ownership not necessarily knowing their ability to do these things, it would require cooperation from the city and potentially St. Louis County. They would ask that this, wouldn't necessarily be a condition of getting the amendment to the conditional use permit approved, but it is certainly something that the ownership acknowledges, agrees with, and is willing to move forward with.
Okay, Ms. Kirkemeyer, that was the major issue at the subcommittee meeting. Do you have anything to add to Mr. Barnett?
we had also included in the updated staff report that we distributed on Friday this map here that development plan that was the development plan that was originally approved for the development. And so this shows kind of the off-site improvement for this pedestrian route that we spoke of at the committee meeting. So what was highlighted was what was approved a long time ago. I really don't know that too much has changed with ADA requirements, but I'm sure, again, that this probably still could be improved. But as it does show, it would be all on public right-of-way, other than the fact maybe that first portion of striped crosswalk possibly could be on the office building property. It looks like it's all public right-of-way, though, for me. So I would kind of agree that it would be something that we should probably take up as a city and try to improve on it if we think that's what needs to be done. I do think, though, that there could certainly just be some things that could be done in the interim just to help accentuate the walkway, which was also what was really requested by CBB. And when I was out there to look at it, I mean, I just think it's hard to find. Even if it's there, it is hard to find. So at the very least right now, I would suggest that crosswalks get properly striped again, which you're always constantly doing that because they do wear over time. And then I would also suggest, though, that we work with Public Works to maybe get a couple of street signs that would really kind of direct pedestrians how to cross. But again, I mean, you can't, people will still develop kind of their own patterns or habits to cross a street, but at least I feel like if we provide a safer recommended crossing, it would be better all the way around.
Consistent with what we talked about. Any questions, comments from commissioners? Anybody in the audience would like to address the commission on this application? You'll note, Mr. Barnett, just to be clear, with regard to that condition, it does say at the request of the city. So essentially, we'd be looking for, the condition would be your consent to the extent the city would act.
Okay.
So nothing that you would do unilaterally. To the extent that the city wanted to do something, the condition would be that you would consent.
Okay. Well, yeah, I think under the little information that we have and what we've discussed in this, you know, in the document set forth, I think they would, the ownership group would consent to striping the crosswalks and accentuating those.
Okay. There's no further questions or comments. Look for a motion that would adopt
I'm
these
sorry, Chairman Damey.
recommendations. Yes, Ms. Kirkmeyer.
So then we had revisions to the sign elevation, which came in after the packet was delivered on Friday. So this is also an update that was placed at your seats tonight. So we were contacted by Springfield Sign as the company that the applicant's going to work with for the signage for this proposed restaurant. And so we had to do a little research again to see what type of signage was approved for the development originally. And through the research, when you flip to the second page of this and see what's proposed for the signage for the proposed restaurant, that building elevation for that end cap was built differently than the plan had shown. It was supposed to come out at a 90-degree angle instead of the 45 that we have here. So what was approved originally for signage for this end cap would have been to allow 2 wall signs, one on the north side of the building and one on the east side of the building. So, but again, with the building elevation having changed over time, this wall sign here, everything looks proportioned, and it certainly is less signage that would have been approved for the development originally. And what they're requesting for is just the 1 wall sign on the building. And then I will point out on the 4th page, we have these discussions that have been coming up a lot more about corporate logos and how to incorporate those sometimes into their elevations. So on the 4th page there, it does show the corporate logo, and this would be kind of a gray faux emblem on the side of the building, but technically that is considered signage under our code, this type of corporate graphic. So that's the second sign that they've requested. And then the third and final sign would be on the monument. I still think it looks like a pylon sign, but the one that's out along Brentwood Boulevard, there is that tall sign, and there is one more sign panel on the very bottom, and that it's empty right now, but that would be the one that First Watch would the restaurant would occupy. So I would suggest that since they've got this to us in time, that we still would entertain looking at the signage plan and include it as part of the whole package.
Staff have any objection to the sign plan? Staff have any objection to the sign plan?
No, I think it's fine.
Looked pretty reasonable to me. Anybody have any issues with the sign plan? Anybody? Mr. Shipley?
Monument sign isn't, it's sort of in order of the stores? Except the first, is that just you're the last in, so you get the last slot?
Yeah, typically the signs they're scaled by the square footage, so the largest tenant's on top. True Runner, who was in there previously, that space was occupied by Borders. It was their cafe. And so True Runner had that bottom panel that
Any other questions or comments from commissioners? None, we'll entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to amend the conditional use permit approval to allow a second restaurant in Brentwood Square.
Everyone, could you speak directly into the microphones?
Motion to amend the conditional use permit approval to allow a second restaurant in Brentwood Square as presented by the petitioner.
Second.
For clarification purposes, Mr. Shipley, is your motion incorporate those 4 recommendations of staff in the staff plan?
Yes, incorporating the crosswalk recommendations of the staff.
Motion by Mr. Shipley, second by Mr. Nelson. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mark Favazza,
Yes.
Rebecca Jacobs,
Yes.
Jeff Moore,
Yes.
Paul Moran,
Yes.
Art Nelson,
Yes.
John Ritter.
Yes.
Lisa Schuring,
Yes.
Tom Shipley,
Yes.
eight ayes. That would pass with a favorable recommendation.
Okay, very good. Mr. Barnett, you can work with staff as to the next step. Thank you for your application.
Thank you all for your time.
Look forward to having first watch in town. What is the timing on opening? All right, thank you, Mr. Barnett. Next item on the agenda is an amendment to the conditional use permit and site plan review for a 7-story hotel, 1695 South Hanley Road. Mr. Chapman, will you please step forward? The commission will recall we took this up several months ago, approved the conditional use permit, and the applicant has elected to amend that permit to remove the parking garage and make some configuration changes. The commission took this up at its open meeting in February and at its subcommittee meeting in February. And the primary issue was parking. Correct, Mr. Chapman? Was there any other change since the subcommittee meeting to the application or the status quo other than the parking issue? Okay. And it's my understanding that CBB has conferred with the applicant and has revised its parking study? And has the commission had a chance to look at that parking study? For the commission's benefit, the commission will note that the CBB is now satisfied with the parking configuration as proposed by the applicant. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. I'm sorry, ma'am. Would you please step forward and just, since we're making a tape here, if you could introduce yourself and then just let the commission know what how CBB's report has changed since the subcommittee meeting.
Sean White with CBB. Do you need address?
No.
Okay. Yeah, when we originally looked at it, you're kind of looking at just general business hotels. So when we look at references like the ITE Parking Generation Manual or the Urban Land Institute's, parking data, we're looking at just a typical business hotel. But then when we had requested more specific data be provided as to what the hotel would offer as far as meeting rooms, restaurants, those types of issues, existing hotels and what they found their provided parking supply was, what their expected people coming to the mode split, so the people who are actually driving their own cars to the hotel versus the people who are having a shuttle or an Uber or an airport or a friend, someone dropping them off. So when we took all of that, that's kind of the updated memo takes all of that into account, is that additional information that we obtain, because when you actually know the use, you can be a lot more specific and looking at what's the actual parking needs for the development. So when we went through our revised calculations, we came up with a recommended parking supply of 101 spaces. I believe they're providing 102 right now. We did also recommend, I think they have 14 compact spaces that were kind of out directly from the main entrance to the building. Again, it was just our recommendation to consider not having the compact spaces. It just seems like usually people park where they want to park, whether it's a 9-foot space or an 8-foot space, and might result in the elimination of those, might result in the loss of another parking space or two. I mean, we didn't look at how that would lay out or how it would impact the site. It was just our recommendation.
Okay. Questions for Mr. Chapman or Ms. White?
So if, Ms. White, if they were to eliminate the 14 compact spaces, how many regular sized spaces would they have versus the current 102?
I think they might lose a space or two.
Address the microphone, please.
Eliminate all of the compact spaces currently in our plan.
So I must have misunderstood. So the 102 doesn't include any compacts?
The original plan submitted shows 105 parking spaces. The site plan that was amended after the subcommittee meeting to add some tree islands and to eliminate 9 compact spaces. Approved as it was submitted, we're back up to 105. We can eliminate all the compact spaces and one space more than.
Thanks.
And it is the recommendation of the city's parking engineer to have those compact spaces removed. Is that understood, Mr. Chapman? So that would, I would think, unless someone has an objection, that would be the desire of this commission as well, which would still bring them above our parking engineer's recommendation. Ms. Kirkmeyer, can you please review any other conditions we want to put on this application?
So if you follow along in the staff report on page 6 was where we had our staff recommendations. Again, this was drafted on Thursday, so a few things have transpired since then. So what I would recommend is under the first bullet point that it should now read as staff's recommendation, instead of a minimum of 115 parking stalls, that we stated as a minimum of 101 standard parking stalls, and then leave the rest go. And I think everything else then can stay the same if the commission is comfortable with the variances in the conditions of approval. So again, just to point out, the one variance that was recommended was for the 4 interior trees that would have been required along the north edge of the site. So again, that condition, that bullet point is what Mr. Chapman was referring to, is why they put it back in and they went from 105 to 102 spaces. So there might be a choice there yet for the commission, but I just wanted to clear that up. But otherwise, I think all the conditions can still remain as was stated on last Thursday.
I didn't catch that. What was the one choice we had? Because we do want the compact spaces to be removed. So what are you saying is still at issue?
So what Mr. Chapman had said was there with Planning Design Studios, which by the way, Scott is here also if you have questions for him. But the project called for the 270 feet row of parking along the north edge of the site, that it would require the 4 interior trees. And so if that one's not granted, then, and so then you'd have to plant the trees, then that's when you slip down to the 102. So they're actually abiding by that landscaping recommendation. So it wouldn't have to be a condition of approval.
Do you have any problem with that recommendation, Mr. Chapman?
Seen the staff report.
Okay, so is there anyone in the audience that would like to address the commission on this application?
Yeah, well,
Nelson.
sorry, and I apologize, since I missed last meeting if it was resolved. I do see here in CBB's report, parking overflow would go into the Wayland Security Office. Is an agreement in place for that if that does happen, or how is that set up?
A handshake agreement is in place for that. And that's why the report envisions lots are all contiguous.
Thank you.
So, and just to clarify on that, Mr. Nelson, that was, I believe that was included in CBB's original report, and we were looking at some overflow, and that was a significant concern on the part of the commission, and that's why we asked the applicant to confer with our parking engineer, and opinion, as I understand it, it's the opinion of the parking engineer that there should not be any overflow parking from this site. True?
Right now.
Further questions or comments from the commissioners? Anyone in the audience have any comments? Okay, entertain a motion that would take into account these recommendations on page 6 of the site plan as revised.
I will motion to approve the site plan as revised and discussed with the conditions in the staff report. And this would now read, my apologies, I wrote it down, 100 and minimum of 101 standard, is that correct?
Correct.
Parking spots.
Okay, motion by Mr. Nelson, second by Mr. Moore. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mark Favazza,
Yes.
Rebecca Jacobs,
Yes.
Jeff Moore,
Yes.
Paul Moran,
Yes.
Art Nelson,
Yes.
John Ritter,
Yes.
Lisa Schuring,
Yes.
Tom Shipley.
Yes.
Recommended for approval, 8 ayes, 0 nays.
Thank you, Mr. Chapman. Thank you,
you
Ms.
all.
White. We have one item under new business this evening, which is a site plan review for comprehensive sign plan for the CIBC Place Building. Is the applicant here? Will you please step forward, ma'am, and introduce yourself and your request?
Good evening, I'm Christine Mudd with Warren Sign Company. We're requesting a sign plan for some wall signs at the former Magna Place, it's now CBIC Place, 1401 South Brentwood Boulevard.
Okay, Ms. Kirkemeyer, staff report.
What was included in the staff report was our best attempt to try to kind of put the pieces together of signage changes for this office building throughout time. So this one never has as far as I know, has never had a comprehensive sign plan on file. So we've been receiving these changes for revisions just individually and reviewing them as they come up. So this is what we instructed Warren Sign Company to provide then, was exactly the signage elevations for the building, what their client wanted to see. You'll have probably, I've already seen that the CIBC Place large sign at the top where the Magna used to be was taken down and removed. That has not increased in square footage since it's actually smaller than the Magna sign. I think what kind of throws it off maybe slightly is, again, just of your proportions of height and width. But it actually is less square footage, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So at some point, though, the commission and the board would have approved 2 tenant signs that is now being requested for future tenants. And as you can tell on the second sheet of the sign elevation, again, it's just they're basically securing that sign area for whatever future tenants they may have, and they warrant should have that sign. So there were actually an elevation that I found that shows, was the University of Phoenix, I believe, and a bank. So at one point in time, it was approved that there were wall signs also in those 2 spots. So it's before you tonight. Again, the CIBC Place sign that's already been changed out is an approved sign. So what we're here for is just your recommendation on the 2 future tenant signs.
Ms. Kirkemeyer, I see that the applicant is, and I guess Ms. Mudd, if you could confirm, what is the height that you're requesting this commission approve with respect to these signs?
We're not requesting a specific height. We don't want to restrict it to that. We're requesting a certain square footage. And that's because different companies can have different branding and logos and letter styles, and we don't want to restrict it to a particular height, but to a particular square footage would work best.
What is that square footage?
250 square feet each on those two signs. So we would have a total on the building of 5% of the wall area.
And do I see a proposed maximum one-tenant sign area, 500 square foot?
That's for the two signs here that say future tenant.
That's the total.
That would be the total. So it would be 250 square foot each for the two future tenant signs.
Okay. Ms. Kirkemeyer, does staff have an opinion on that requested square footage maximum?
Not really on the overall sign area allowance, but to that point, I think that the commission should give some consideration to having a still height and width restriction. It's your opinion, but I think again with the CIBC place sign, it kind of at least demonstrates what we're referring to. If there's no height or width regulated, as long as it can find yourself under that total sign area allowance, you can change out the sign. But if the commission also feels that, you know, that's appropriate, it's just really kind of an opinion if you ask me. So I don't really have a recommendation, but if that's something that, you know, the commission would want to take up, that might be other restrictions you'd place on it, a height and a width.
No industry standard as far as this type of office building?
No, because I mean, I have to agree then, you know, with the petitioner on that. I don't think there's any industry standards because they all want something different. You know, we talked about earlier tonight that now it's kind of become more of a thing to always affix your corporate logo to everything too, which I don't know if that was the case as much back in the day, but, you know, it's something now we see more often. So I can understand the point that as soon as you put height and width, it further restricts it. But on the other hand, again, if there is none, then it can kind of distort also the appearance of it. But that's just opinion, so.
Questions, comments from commissioners? Mr. Ritter?
I guess we don't restrict the height. What would stop them from putting a vertical?
Bud?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
I guess building.
Sir, is your microphone on?
That would not work. Signs are mostly horizontal, and I don't believe that.
I can speak to that.
Okay, this is the building owner and management.
Sarah Mansholt with Altus Properties. We have controlling interest in CIBC Place. From a landlord perspective, I agree. We do not want to limit height to specifics. We do not know the corporate logos that are going to go up there, but the window glass system itself of Magna Place, we do not want to infringe on our tenants' views above and below it. So there will be, and I can't speak right now to exactly which part is spandrel glass, but we would never allow full vertical because it would impede the views of the multiple floor tenants. And even the CIBC Place sign right now up at the top is placed in a way that it does not infringe on the views of the 10th floor tenant. That was very important to us as the landlord. So we would, as we go forward, make sure that that wouldn't happen. There is whether it's those two bands of windows that are shown on here, I can assure you that we would not allow it to go above that roof line there. That one line is a parapet wall, or below the window line that says where the bottom of the F is and the T, because then that would impact the views from the tenant spaces.
Also, that would be an engineering nightmare to try to do that as a vertical sign with, you know, attachment detail on that. We have to use steel, and it goes over the parapet to attach that sign securely and safely.
So one of the things that the commission might want to consider is if there's a box or something that is put, I don't know how we do it, but whatever that measurement is there between those two lines of glass that are there.
Yes.
That a height restriction goes at that level.
Right. Yep. Right.
And then
that
still
is
cap,
reasonable.
and then still cap the sign area allowance to still be a maximum of 250 square feet within that box.
Because the difference is that private bank sign, I think everybody had seen it over the years, and then everybody saw the first version that CIBC put up, the tiny little postage stamp that we told them was not gonna be visible. The private bank sign was pretty small. The University of Phoenix sign, I don't know if there is a photo in your guys' packet, that's a long name, and that's the reason we're not wanting to restrict the horizontal. It doesn't impact the views from the building. And I would also be reasonably comfortable, and I'll go ahead and throw this out there because I know we're good with it as a landlord. Color logo, white lettering. We do not have any interest on there being blue signage up there. And the sign person's probably gonna say, don't put yourself in a box. But I can tell you right now, Altus, we tried very hard to get CIBC to go all white, national branding. We came to terms with it, but every other sign that goes on these two spaces, we would limit the tenant to color in their logo. Any lettering would have to be white.
Okay, sounds like the conditions of a color logo, white lettering, and then the box as reflected on the sign plan is acceptable to the applicant. Further questions, comments from commissioners? Mr. Shipley?
Good question. So on this document,
Yes.
Magna Place sign was 594 square feet, and the new CIBC place is 531.
Correct. So it's smaller than what was there.
Is that calculated by like the width and height, like a rectangle? Or is it
Yes.
calculated like this is a C and this is the I and this is?
No, we do a height
Surface?
times width, and we box that in. Some municipalities do it different, but that's the most common way to do it, and that's the way most cities do it.
And just one question for staff. It's really on the process. So this was swapped out, Magna for CIBC. Were we involved? Was the city involved, or does it just
No, just
kind of
internally,
like the
they were.
Browns leaving Cleveland? Like,
Yeah, internally, they were just required to get a sign permit, but as long, again, this sign area allowance was already approved before, so if it
So it
fell
wasn't-
in that of being that or less, then it's just an internal sign permit, which they did everything appropriately to get a permit.
Thank you.
More?
Not possibly one 500 square foot sign.
Yes, I believe it's for a maximum of 250 square feet, each sign, a maximum of 250 square feet. You can always go less than 250 feet, but the maximum established would be 250. So you couldn't load it up, 300 square feet and 200 square feet.
500 square feet, that's what.
And I think his concern is stemming from, this is what confused me, is this reference on the sign plan to the proposed maximum one tenant sign area of 500 square foot.
I can speak for the ownership. I don't know how it was written. This is what we're looking for. We have no interest in putting another big CIBC sign in one place. The building looks balanced with the eyebrows down here on the side, and however it needs to be written into the plan, that it is very clear that it is one on the left side, one on the right side, east, west, up to 250. We are fine with that.
So I guess the commission would just ask for this last item to be striked.
Yeah, that confused me as well, Mr. Chairman.
Right, agreed. Okay, good question, Mr. Moore. Any further questions or comments? Anyone in the audience would like to address the commission on this application? No, I think we've got some conditions, and I think we're ready to act if the commission is so inclined. Is the commission so inclined?
Motion to approve the comprehensive sign plan that has been submitted with the amendment of the line being stricken, proposed maximum one tenant sign area, 500 square feet.
Second?
And just for the record,
And, sorry,
Go ahead, Mr. Nelson.
Yeah, I was going to say, and, actually, what do we have? And then the, well, hold on, are you actually, I do have,
Color logo, white letters.
sorry. There we go. Yeah, color logo, white lettering, and did we want to have a limit, I guess, and I'm asking a question while I'm making a motion, which is not allowed. Did we want to have a limit to those 2 windows?
And yeah, I would think that the condition that was agreed to by the applicant was contained within the box as reflected on the sign plan as 2 signs of 250 square foot each.
The motion should contain the wording that the chairman just mentioned.
Okay with me, Mr. Shipley?
Yeah, but one thing I just thought of, so if we only say color logo, white lettering, we could have a logo that's 225 square feet and lettering that's 25 square feet.
Wouldn't seem to
Which would
be,
go back to the concern that we don't want a big blue sign. Should we put something in there like an 80-20 or a ratio of the color logo to the white?
I get the
Just
concern.
occurred
I
to me.
can't imagine it'd be in the interest of the building to put a sign up
Can't
there
imagine
like
either.
that.
I can't think of a scenario. I
Yeah.
appreciate what you're bringing up. I can't think of one in.
No, I've never seen a logo overshadow any lettering like that ever.
Word?
Well, that's proportional to, the oval is proportional to the letters, but,
And remember, they're going to be limited to this box space as reflected on
right,
this.
the 2 windows, so we can't go really beyond
I
those.
just didn't
It
want us
won't
to
be
miss
a
anything.
garish sign where it's gonna be so large that it's,
Box. You okay with it, Mr. Shipley?
Yes.
Motion by Mr. Nelson, second by Mr. Shipley, incorporating the conditions as discussed. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mark Favazza,
Yes.
Rebecca Jacobs,
Yes.
Jeff Moore,
Yes.
Paul Moran,
Yes.
Art Nelson,
Yes?
John Ritter,
Yes.
Lisa Schering,
Yes.
and Tom Shipley.
Yes.
Motion
Hey,
passes. Thank you, ladies. can
Thank
work
you
with
very
staff
much.
As to the next step. Thank you. No further new business on the agenda. I see no aldermen in the audience. City planners report?
None?
But we are going to take up the item that was tabled at the April meeting. Is that right, Ms. Kirkemeyer?
Yes.
And for the first time in several months, there does not seem to be a need for a subcommittee meeting this month. So, commissioners, we appreciate all your dedication and attendance. You didn't even show up at the last month. All right, Ms. Kirkemeyer, you can handle the rationale.
The only thing I did want to make mention is this coming Monday night will be the Board of Aldermen's second reading of the establishment of the MC district and the rezoning of those 80-some parcels. So if you're inclined to come to the meeting Monday night,
Exciting.
all right.
Any other business? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Mr. Moran,
Chairman Jamie,
second by everybody.
do you have a comment? No? I have a question. Oh.
I'll go ahead and step forward, sir. We'll take you under other business.
Thank you. My name is Robert Morrissey, and I own a small antiques gallery over in the Brentwood Industrial Court, or the Hanley Industrial Court, I'm sorry. And I just moved in September, and I'm not quite open yet. And I have a few questions that I'd like to ask. I'd heard someplace along the line that there's discussion about changing the name of Hanley Industrial Court to Hanley Business Park. And I'm wondering if that's true, and if there's any way that I, as a business owner, can get involved to help that process along. So that's one question. And then the other question that I have is the signage over there. As you guys know, it's kind of a rabbit warren getting through there. And what would it take to get signs sort of at the entrance points of the industrial court that people could look and say, okay, well, here's so-and-so, that would let you know where you're going and keep people from getting lost? It's be very similar to signs you see in subdivisions and that type of thing. So those would be the two questions I have. And then I don't know if it's involved with this group or not, but isn't there an organization that's involved with just the businesses of the Hanley Industrial Court? And does that come through here or what? So, general questions.
Mr. Morris, have you talked with Ms. Kirkemeyer yet?
Well, we've
Several-
had
several
email
months ago.
correspondence, very pleasant, yeah, right.
So she's your first contact. She'll have
Okay.
much more expertise than we have. I can say that each of the items that you've just referenced tonight
Yes.
were all addressed in the comprehensive plan that this
Okay.
commission just passed. So I think your concerns will be addressed within that comprehensive plan.
Okay.
And I think Ms. Kirkemeyer can definitely set you up with a copy of that.
Okay,
But thank you for coming.
terrific,
All
thanks
right.
for
Thanks,
listening.
sir.
Okay.
The motion to adjourn stand?
Stands.
Okay, all in favor?
Third it.
Any opposed? All right, stand adjourned.
Yeah, but you're gonna pick up the hotel bill.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I don't know about this whole cost of business